The champagne glasses shattered against marble floors, and in that deafening silence, Chiamaka watched her entire world collapse. Her mother's lavish wedding, funded with her father's hard-earned inheritance, was about to be exposed as the ultimate betrayal, but what she didn't know was that this public humiliation was just the first domino in a chain of devastating secrets that would unravel everything she believed about her family, force her into a dangerous trap with a master manipulator, and reveal a hidden truth about her beloved father that would either destroy them completely or forge them into something unbreakable. Welcome to Kaysmart Mythic Tales, where we bring you the most gripping African family dramas that will leave you breathless. Thank you for your incredible support. You are the reason we keep bringing these powerful stories to life. Before we dive into the story, kindly subscribe, drop a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. Now let's get into this explosive story. The champagne flutes shattered against the marble floor of the Grand Palm Hotel ballroom in Lagos, and 300 guests fell silent. Chiamaka Okonkwo stood frozen at the entrance, her red evening gown suddenly feeling like a costume. Her mother, Ngozi, had just introduced her new husband, Chief Emeka Nwosu, to the crowd. A lavish wedding reception Chiamaka had reluctantly funded with money from her late father's estate. But it wasn't the extravagance that made her blood run cold. It was the woman stepping forward from the crowd. "That's my husband," the woman said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. She wore a traditional iro and buba, her head wrap perfectly tied, her face contorted with rage and humiliation. "Chief Emeka Nwosu is my husband. We've been married for 23 years. The ballroom erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Camera phones raised like weapons. Ngozi's face drained of color. This must be a mistake. A mistake." The woman, later identified as Mrs. Adana Nwosu, pulled out her phone, projecting wedding photos onto the large screen meant for the couple's montage. There was Emeka, younger but unmistakable, standing beside Adana in traditional Igbo attire, surrounded by family. "I have 4 children with this man. 4. And you dare call me a mistake?" Chiamaka's chest tightened. She had warned her mother. 3 months ago, when Ngozi announced her engagement to this smooth-talking businessman barely a year after their father's death, Chiamaka had begged her to slow down, to investigate. But Ngozi, desperate to feel wanted again at 62, had dismissed her daughter's concerns as jealousy. Now, standing in this ballroom filled with Lagos society's elite, church members, business associates, family friends, Chiamaka felt the weight of their judgment shift toward her. She had signed the checks. She had released funds from her father's estate for this circus. Chief Emeka tried to speak, his expensive agbada suddenly looking like a costume. "Adana, please, we can discuss this privately." "Privately?" Adana's laugh was bitter. "Like you discussed marrying another woman privately? While I was raising your children. While I was managing your household in Enugu." She turned to Ngozi. "Did he tell you about the house in Enugu? The children in university? Did he mention that while he was courting you here in Lagos, he was celebrating our daughter's graduation last month?" Ngozi stumbled backward, reaching for Chiamaka, who instinctively stepped away. The distance between them, just 2 feet, felt like a chasm. "Mama, I told you," Chiamaka whispered, her voice breaking. "I told you to wait. I told you we needed to verify." "Don't," Ngozi hissed, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. "Don't you dare say, 'I told you so' right now." But the guests were already moving toward the exits, whispers transforming into open gossip. Chiamaka could hear the words floating through the air like poison. "Desperate widow. That daughter should have stopped this. The whole family is disgraced." Chiamaka was 34 years old, an accomplished architect with her own firm in Victoria Island. She had spent the last year grieving her father, supporting her mother, and trying to protect what remained of their family legacy. Now she watched that legacy crumble in real time, broadcast live on Instagram by at least 50 guests. Her phone buzzed. Text messages flooding in. Her younger brother, Chukwudi, studying medicine in Johannesburg. "What the hell is happening? I'm seeing videos. Videos, Chi." Her best friend, Amara. "Come to my place." "Nah. Don't go home." Her colleague, Tund. "The clips are everywhere. We need to do damage control for the firm." Chief Emeka was trying to usher Adana out, but she planted her feet. "No. Everyone here needs to know what kind of man you are. Everyone who celebrated this abomination needs to know the truth." A pastor stepped forward, Reverend Adeyemi from Grace Lighthouse Church, where Ngozi had been a faithful member for 15 years. His face was set in disappointment. Sister Ngozi, we will need to have a serious discussion about this situation. The church board will. The church. Ngozi's voice cracked. You're concerned about the church right now? We are concerned about righteousness, sister. About the sanctity of marriage. About the example set before our congregation. His eyes flickered to Chiamaka. Your daughter enabled this union by releasing estate funds. There are questions about judgment. About discernment. Chiamaka felt the accusation like a slap. She had followed her mother's wishes, and now she was complicit in the scandal. Security finally escorted Adana out, but the damage was complete. The ballroom, decorated with thousands of dollars worth of flowers and gold accents, looked like a mausoleum. Ngozi collapsed into a chair, her white lace wedding outfit now seeming grotesque. Mama, we need to leave, Chiamaka said quietly, reaching for her mother's arm. Ngozi jerked away. This is your fault, she spat, her grief transforming into rage. If you had just been supportive instead of questioning everything, if you had welcomed Emeka into our family with joy instead of suspicion, maybe... Maybe what? Maybe his real wife wouldn't exist. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and unforgiving. Ngozi stood, her eyes blazing with a fury Chiamaka had never seen before. You've always been jealous. Since your father died, you've tried to control everything. The house. The money. My life. You wanted me to stay alone bitter, while you moved on with your life. That's not. I want you out of my house, Ngozi said, her voice cold. Out of my life. You and your judgment and your control. The inheritance your father left me? I don't need your permission to access it anymore. Leave. The remaining guests watched this new drama unfold, their phones still recording. Chiamaka felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to cry here, in front of these vultures. She turned and walked out of the ballroom, her heels clicking against the marble, her spine straight despite the trembling in her legs. Outside, Lagos traffic roared past the hotel, indifferent to her humiliation. Her phone buzzed again. A blocked number. She almost didn't answer. Chiamaka Okonkwo? A woman's voice, professional and careful. Yes. My name is Barrister Folake Ademola. I'm calling regarding your father's estate and some irregularities that have recently come to light. We need to meet. Urgently. There's something about your mother's new husband you need to know. Chiamaka's blood ran cold. What kind of irregularities? Not over the phone. Tomorrow. My office in Ikoyi. 10 a.m. Miss Okonkwo. The lawyer paused. Be very careful. Tonight's disgrace? It's just the beginning. The line went dead. Chiamaka didn't sleep. She spent the night in Amara's guest room in Lekki, scrolling through social media, watching her family's disgrace go viral. The hashtags were already trending. Hashtag Lagos wedding scandal, hashtag Chief Emeka Nwosu, hashtag Okonkwo family. Someone had created a meme of her mother's shocked face. The cruelty was breathtaking. By morning, she had 47 missed calls from her mother and a voicemail that made her stomach turn. Chiamaka, I know I said terrible things, but I need you. Please. Emeka is gone. He took my jewelry. The checkbook. I don't know what to do. But Chiamaka couldn't deal with her mother yet. Not until she understood what Barrister Ademola had to say. The lawyer's office in Ikoyi was elegant and discreet, housed in a colonial-era building with ceiling fans and mahogany furniture. Folake Ademola was in her 50s, her grey locks pulled back in an elegant bun, her eyes sharp with intelligence. Thank you for coming, she said, gesturing to a leather chair. I know yesterday was difficult. How do you know about my family? Chiamaka asked, too exhausted for pleasantries. Because Chief Emeka Nwosu isn't just a bigamist, Folake said bluntly. He's a professional con artist. And your family isn't his first target. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs spanning 15 years. Emeka appeared in each one with a different name. Chief Okafor in Enugu. Mr. Uche in Abuja. Pastor Emmanuel in Port Harcourt. Each time, he had courted wealthy widows, married them quickly, and disappeared with substantial sums of money. He's wanted in 4 states, Folake continued. But he's clever. He changes identities, targets women in grief, and moves before authorities can catch him. Your mother was supposed to be his biggest score yet. Chiamaka felt sick. Was. I represent Adana Nwosu, his actual wife. She's been tracking him for 2 years, ever since he abandoned their family and stole their savings. When she discovered he was targeting your mother, she hired me to help expose him publicly. Last night was calculated. Miss Okonkwo. It had to be public to protect your mother's assets. Then why didn't you warn us sooner? We tried. I sent 3 letters to your mother over the past 2 months. She dismissed them as jealous interference from ex-wives. Her exact words to my assistant: "Tell whoever sent this that real love cannot be stopped by bitter women." Chiamaka closed her eyes. That sounded exactly like something her mother would say. Ngozi had always been proud, romantic, easily swept away by grand gestures and smooth words, traits her practical, cautious husband had balanced during their marriage. Without him, she'd become vulnerable. "There's more," Folake said, her tone darkening. She pulled out another document, a forged will. 3 weeks ago, your mother signed this, believing it was an update to her estate planning. It's actually a document transferring 80% of her inherited assets to Chief Emeka upon her death, and granting him power of attorney over her accounts immediately. The room tilted. That's impossible. I'm the executor. Any changes would require my signature. This is a forgery designed to bypass you. He planned to use it to drain accounts slowly, making it look like your mother's legitimate spending. By the time anyone noticed, he'd be gone. Folake leaned forward. Miss Okonkwo, he's already begun. Yesterday morning before the wedding, he transferred 2 million naira from your mother's account to an offshore account in Ghana. 2 million naira. Chiamaka thought of her father's years of hard work, building his construction company from nothing, providing for his family, leaving behind enough to ensure his wife's comfort for life. Now a stranger was stealing it, piece by piece. Can we stop him? Chiamaka asked, her voice hoarse. The police are looking, but men like Emeka are ghosts. They have multiple passports, safe houses, networks. However, Folake paused. Adana believes she knows where he might be. There's a property in Abuja, registered under another alias. If we move fast, if you're willing to help, we might catch him before he disappears again. Help how? He still believes your mother loves him. Despite last night, despite everything, he knows she's vulnerable. We've been monitoring his phone. He sent her 3 texts this morning, apologizing, claiming Adana is lying, promising to explain everything. He wants to meet her. Alone. Chiamaka understood immediately. You want to use my mother as bait. I want to use you, Folake corrected. Pretend to reconcile with your mother. Convince her to tell Emeka she'll meet him. But when he arrives, we'll be there. Police, witnesses, evidence. We'll trap him. It was dangerous. It required deceiving her mother, who had just banished her from her life. It meant facing the man who had humiliated their family, who had stolen their dignity along with their money. But what choice did she have? I'll do it, Chiamaka said. But I need something in return. Name it. Protection. For my mother. For my brother. When this is over, when Emeka is arrested, I want guarantees that he can never come near our family again. Restraining orders, whatever it takes. Folake extended her hand. You have my word. They shook, and Chiamaka felt a strange sense of purpose settle over her exhaustion. She wasn't just her mother's daughter anymore. She was a warrior, fighting to reclaim what had been stolen. But first, she had to face Ngozi. Her mother's house in Ikoyi looked different in daylight. Smaller somehow, despite its 5 bedrooms and sprawling garden. Chiamaka used her key, finding Ngozi in the living room, still wearing yesterday's wedding outfit, makeup smeared, surrounded by wedding gifts that now felt like monuments to her humiliation. Mama, Chiamaka said softly. Ngozi looked up, her eyes red and swollen. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ngozi's face crumpled, and she began to sob, deep wrenching sounds that came from somewhere primal. Chiamaka crossed the room and held her, feeling her mother's body shake with grief and shame. They stayed like that for several minutes, the silence broken only by Ngozi's crying and the distant sound of Lagos traffic. I was so stupid, Ngozi finally whispered. You tried to warn me. Chikwudi tried to warn me. I wouldn't listen. I just wanted to feel special again. Wanted. After your father died, I felt invisible. Like my life was over. And then Emeka came, and he made me feel beautiful, desired, young. I ignored every red flag because I was too desperate to be alone with my grief. It's not your fault, Mama. He's a professional. He's done this before. Ngozi pulled back, frowning. What do you mean? Chiamaka explained everything. The lawyer, the evidence, the other victims, the forged documents, the stolen money. With each revelation, Ngozi's expression shifted from shock to horror to something harder, determination. He's texted me, Ngozi said, showing her phone. 3 messages, each more desperate than the last. My love, please let me explain. Adana is mentally unstable. She's been harassing me for years. Everything I did was for us. For our future. Don't let her lies destroy what we have. Meet me. Just once. Let me prove my love to you. I'm at the Intercontinental. Room 512. Please. Ngozi. I'm lost without you. Chiamaka felt rage surge through her veins. Even now, after being exposed, he was manipulating her mother, counting on love and desperation to override reason. We can catch him, Chiamaka said carefully. The lawyer has a plan. But it requires you to meet him. To pretend you still believe him. Just long enough for the police to arrive. Ngozi's hands trembled. I don't know if I can face him. You're the strongest woman I know, Mama. You raised 2 children while helping Papa build his business. You survived losing the love of your life. You can survive this. Chiamaka took her mother's hands. But we do this together. No more secrets. No more going it alone. Ngozi searched her daughter's face, seeing perhaps for the first time the woman Chiamaka had become. No longer the little girl who needed protection, but a partner, an equal, a warrior in her own right. Together, Ngozi agreed. They spent the next hour planning with Folake via phone. The meeting would happen that evening at the hotel. Ngozi would wear a wire. Plainclothes police would be stationed throughout the lobby and hallways. Chiamaka would wait in an adjacent room with Folake and Adana, monitoring everything. As the sun began to set over Lagos, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Chiamaka helped her mother dress. A simple blue dress, elegant but subdued. No jewelry. Nothing Emeka could steal. What if he runs? Ngozi asked, applying lipstick with shaking hands. He won't. Men like him are arrogant. He thinks he's smarter than everyone. That's how we'll catch him. They drove to the Intercontinental in silence, the city lights blurring past the windows. Lagos at night was beautiful and chaotic, full of possibility and danger in equal measure, just like this plan. In the hotel lobby, Folake was waiting with 2 police officers in civilian clothes. They fitted Ngozi with the wire, tested the connection, and reviewed the plan one final time. Get him to confess, Folake instructed. Ask about the money. About the forged documents. About his other wives. The more he says, the stronger our case. Ngozi nodded, her jaw set with determination. She looked at Chiamaka one last time. If something goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong. But if it does, tell your brother I love him. Tell him. Tell him his mother was foolish but brave. You'll tell him yourself. They embraced quickly, then Ngozi walked toward the elevators, her spine straight, her head high, a queen walking into battle. In room 510, directly next to Emeka's suite, Chiamaka put on headphones and listened to her mother knock on his door. She heard it open, heard Emeka's smooth voice. My darling, I knew you'd come. I knew our love was stronger than lies. Chiamaka's hands clenched into fists. And then, through the wire clear as a bell, she heard her mother say, Tell me the truth, Emeka. All of it. Who are you really? A pause. Then Emeka's laugh, low and dangerous. Oh, Ngozi. You couldn't just let it go, could you? The sound that followed made Chiamaka's blood run cold, a door slamming, a lock clicking, and her mother's sharp intake of breath. Folake, Chiamaka whispered urgently. Something's wrong. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves emotional drama. What do you think happens next? Comment below. Through the wire, Chiamaka heard her mother's voice, steady despite the fear that must have been coursing through her veins. Emeka, what are you doing? Open the door. Not yet. His voice had changed, the smooth charm replaced by something colder, calculated. We need to talk. Really talk. Without your meddling daughter listening in. Chiamaka's heart stopped. He knows. Folake was already on her phone, signaling the officers. Move now. He's made her. But before they could act, Emeka spoke again, his words carried clearly through the wire. I'm not stupid, Ngozi. You think I didn't notice you've barely looked at me since you walked in? The way you keep glancing at your purse? I know a wire when I see one. The sound of fabric tearing. The wire had been discovered. Everyone out. Folake shouted, but Chiamaka was already moving, bursting out of room 510 and pounding on Emeka's door. Open up. Mama. Inside, she could hear struggling. Furniture scraping. Her mother's voice, sharp with anger rather than fear. You think you can intimidate me? I've buried a husband, raised 2 children through recessions and violence. You're nothing but a small-time thief playing dress-up in borrowed clothes. Pride and terror warred in Chiamaka's chest. Even trapped, her mother was fighting. The police arrived, using a master key to open the door. The room was in disarray. Overturned chairs, scattered papers, an open window with curtains billowing in the night breeze. But no Emeka. No Ngozi. The balcony, an officer shouted, rushing to the window. Chiamaka's stomach dropped. They were on the 5th floor. But when she reached the window and looked down, she saw something impossible. Emeka was climbing down the fire escape, moving with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before. And he wasn't alone. He had her mother's arm twisted behind her back, using her as a human shield as he descended. If anyone follows, I push her off, he called up, his voice carrying across the Lagos night. Call off your dogs, or she falls. The officers froze. Standard hostage protocol. Don't escalate when the victim's life is at risk. But Chiamaka could see the calculation in Emeka's eyes even from here. He was planning something worse than a simple escape. Let her go, Chiamaka shouted down. Take the money. Take everything. Just let her go. Emeka laughed. The money's already gone, sweetheart. Transferred this afternoon. This was supposed to be a goodbye gift to your mother. A lovely evening before I disappeared. But she had to be difficult. Had to bring the law into family business. He was on the 3rd floor landing now, Ngozi stumbling beside him. Chiamaka could see her mother's face, bruised but defiant, her eyes searching the ground below for escape routes, for advantages, for anything she could use. That's when Chiamaka saw them. A group of women emerging from the hotel's ground floor entrance. At least 20 of them, led by Adana Nwosu. They moved with purpose, forming a semicircle around the base of the fire escape, blocking every exit route. Emeka saw them too and stopped his descent. Adana. Always the dramatic one. That's my husband's money you stole, Adana called up. My children's inheritance. Our future. And now you're stealing from this woman too? No more, Emeka. Tonight it ends. You can't stop me. I have a hostage. And we have numbers. Adana gestured to the women around her. Some were former victims Chiamaka recognized from the lawyer's files. Others were community members who had seen the viral videos and come seeking justice. Where will you go, Emeka? Which direction? We're everywhere. And even if you escape tonight, we'll find you. We'll always find you. It was a standoff. Emeka on the fire escape with Ngozi. Police above and below, unable to intervene without risking violence. The women forming a human barrier. And Chiamaka, suspended in a moment that felt eternal, watching her mother's life hang in the balance. Then Ngozi did something unexpected. She stopped resisting. Her body went limp, becoming dead weight in Emeka's grip. The sudden shift in balance caught him off guard, and for a moment, just a brief, critical moment, his hold loosened. Ngozi twisted, driving her elbow into his ribs with surprising force. Years of carrying groceries, lifting children, managing a household had made her stronger than she looked. Emeka gasped, his grip breaking, and Ngozi wrenched free, scrambling up the fire escape toward the police rather than down toward the women. Chiamaka watched in horror as Emeka, enraged and cornered, lunged after her mother. The fire escape shuddered under their combined weight and momentum. Metal groaned. Bolts strained.
Mama, run!
Chiamaka screamed. But Ngozi wasn't running.
She had reached a platform between floors and turned to face Emeka, her chest heaving, her dress torn, but her eyes blazing with a fury that made her look 20 years younger.
"You wanted to steal my dignity," she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. Everyone, police, women, hotel guests gathering below, was watching. "You wanted to make me feel worthless, used, discarded. Just another mark in your con. But I am Ngozi Okonkwo, wife of Chidi Okonkwo for 35 years, mother of 2 beautiful children,
Survivor of things you couldn't imagine.
and you? You're nothing but a coward who preys on grief." Emeka's face twisted with rage. He lunged again, but this time the fire escape, old, poorly maintained, stressed beyond its limits, gave way. The section beneath his feet collapsed with a shriek of tearing metal. He fell. Not far, only 1 floor, landing on the 2nd floor platform with a sickening crack. He tried to stand, clutching his leg, but the women were already climbing up to meet him. Adana reached him first, her face a mask of righteous fury. "You took everything from me," she said softly, standing over him. "My husband. My security. My children's respect. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. But I am enough. We all are." The police arrived moments later, pulling Emeka to his feet despite his protests, reading him his rights. He was still shouting threats, promises of lawyers and retribution, but his voice was drowned out by something unexpected: applause. The women below were clapping. The hotel guests who had gathered were clapping. Even some of the police officers, professionals who had seen too many men like Emeka escape justice, were clapping. Chiamaka helped her mother down the fire escape, supporting her weight as they descended carefully past the broken section. When they reached the ground, Adana was waiting. The 2 women faced each other, rivals who had never asked to be rivals, brought together by one man's cruelty and greed. "Thank you," Ngozi said quietly, "for exposing him.
For saving me from making an even bigger mistake."
Adana nodded. "We protect each other. That's what women do."
"That's what we've always done, when men try to divide us."
They embraced, briefly but genuinely, and Chiamaka felt something shift in the air around them. A sense of solidarity, of shared trauma transforming into shared strength. Fo Lake appeared, looking exhausted but triumphant. "We got everything. Confessions. Evidence."
"He won't talk his way out of this one." "What about the money?"
Chiamaka asked. "Frozen accounts as of 2 hours ago. We'll recover most of it. The rest." She shrugged. "Consider it tuition for an expensive lesson." The police led Emeka away in handcuffs, still protesting, still threatening. Chiamaka watched him go, feeling not triumph but a strange emptiness. Justice was being served, but the wounds he had inflicted, on her mother, on Adana, on all his victims, would take much longer to heal. "Come home, Mama," Chiamaka said, wrapping her arm around Ngozi's shoulders.
"Let's go home."
But as they turned toward the parking lot, a man stepped out of the shadows. Tall, well-dressed, holding a briefcase. He looked directly at Chiamaka, his expression grave. "Miss Okonkwo? I'm Barrister Chibiz Okoli. I represent your father's business partners. We need to talk about his estate. About certain discrepancies that have recently come to light." Chiamaka's blood ran cold. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Not here. Not now. But there's a problem with your father's will. A big problem. And it affects everything. The house, the company, your entire inheritance." He handed her a card. "Tomorrow. My office. Don't bring your mother. This is something she can't know. Not yet." He walked away, disappearing into the Lagos night, leaving Chiamaka standing frozen, her mother leaning against her, exhausted and oblivious to this new threat. What do you think the lawyer discovered about her father's estate? Comment below. Chiamaka sat in Barrister Chibiz Okoli's office in Victoria Island, her palms sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. She hadn't told her mother about this meeting. After yesterday's ordeal, Ngozi was resting at home under the care of Amara, who had insisted on staying with them until things calmed down. Chikwudi was flying in from Johannesburg tomorrow, worried and angry that he'd missed the drama. But Chiamaka had a feeling things weren't about to calm down. They were about to get much worse.
Barrister Oakley was in his late 50s, with silver hair and the weary expression of a man who had delivered too much bad news over the years. He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk, its surface covered with files and documents that made Chiamaka's stomach turn. "Thank you for coming alone," he began. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear. But you need to know before decisions are made about your father's estate."
"Just tell me," Chiamaka said, too exhausted for preamble. He slid a folder across the desk. "Your father, Chidi Okonkwo, was a brilliant businessman. His construction company was worth millions. But there's a complication. 3 years before his death, he borrowed heavily from investors to fund a major project, the Lekki Gardens development. The project succeeded, but your father never repaid the loans. Instead, he used the profits to make other investments, some of which failed spectacularly." "That doesn't make sense. Papa was meticulous about debts." "He would never." "He was also protecting someone," Barrister Oakley interrupted gently. "About 4 years ago, your brother Chukwudi got into trouble in South Africa. Serious trouble. He was involved in a car accident that injured 3 people. The medical bills, legal fees, and settlement costs were enormous. Your father covered everything, but it depleted his liquid assets. The debts he incurred were to protect your brother's future, to keep him in medical school, to prevent criminal charges, to ensure he could still have a career." Chiamaka felt the room spinning. "Chukwudi never said anything. Your father made him promise not to. He didn't want your mother to worry, didn't want you to think differently of your brother. Chidi took out loans against the company, against the house, against everything. He planned to repay them gradually, but then he got sick. Stage 4 cancer. He died before he could make things right. So the estate is... what? Bankrupt. Not bankrupt, but deeply in debt. The investors, 3 of them, have been patient. They respected your father. But now, with Emeka's theft and the public scandal, they're worried. They want their money. Immediately. And if they don't get it..." He paused, clearly dreading what came next. "They have the legal right to seize the house, the company assets, even your mother's inheritance. Everything." The implications hit Chiamaka like a physical blow. Her mother, who had just survived betrayal and public humiliation, who was finally beginning to heal, she would lose her home. The home where she had raised her children, where she had laughed with her husband, where every room held memories of their life together. "How much?" Chiamaka asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 35 million naira. Plus interest. Chiamaka laughed. A harsh, broken sound. "That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money. Even if we sold everything, it wouldn't be enough. There is one option." Barrister Oakley opened another file. "Your father had a life insurance policy. A large one. It would cover the debts and leave enough for your mother to live comfortably. But there's a clause. The policy only pays out if your father's death is ruled accidental or natural causes resulting from unforeseen illness. He died of cancer. That's natural causes. Technically, yes. But the insurance company is investigating. They've found irregularities. Evidence suggesting your father may have known about his cancer earlier than he claimed. That he concealed his diagnosis to ensure the policy stayed active. If they prove he committed insurance fraud, even by omission, they won't pay out. And the investors will take everything." Chiamaka stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, Lagos sprawled in all its chaotic glory. Millions of people living their lives, unaware that hers was collapsing. Her father, whom she had idolized, had lied. Had taken on crushing debt to protect Chukwudi. Had potentially committed fraud to protect his family. And now the consequences were crashing down on all of them. "What do you need from me?" she asked, still facing the window. "I need you to find evidence that your father didn't know about his cancer until the official diagnosis. Medical records, emails, anything that proves he was honest with the insurance company. I need you to convince the investigators that Chidi Okonkwo was a man of integrity, not a fraud. And if I can't? Then I need you to prepare your mother for the worst. Because in 3 weeks, the investors will file for asset seizure. And there won't be anything I can do to stop them." Chiamaka closed her eyes, seeing her mother's face, imagining having to tell her that not only had her new husband betrayed her, but her beloved late husband had left them in ruins. The woman had already lost so much. How much more could she endure? I need access to my father's files, Chiamaka said, turning back to face the lawyer. Everything. His office records, his personal emails, his medical history. And I need you to buy me time with the investors. Tell them we're cooperating, that we're finding solutions. Just give me 3 weeks. And if you can't find what you need, then I'll sell my firm. My apartment. Whatever it takes to save my mother's house. Barrister Oakley studied her with something like respect. Your father would be proud of you, Miss Okonkwo. Whatever his mistakes, he raised a daughter with integrity. Or stubbornness, Chiamaka said bitterly. Sometimes I can't tell the difference. She spent the next week diving into her father's past like an archaeologist, uncovering layers of secrets she had never imagined. His office, still maintained exactly as he'd left it in the house, became her headquarters. She went through every file, every email, every cryptic note scribbled in the margins of contracts. What she found broke her heart. Her father had known about the cancer. Not for years, but for months before the official diagnosis. He had felt the symptoms, the persistent cough, the weight loss, the fatigue, but had ignored them, buried himself in work, pretended everything was fine. When he finally went to the doctor and received the diagnosis, it was already stage 4. By then, the insurance policy had been active for years, and technically, he hadn't lied. He just delayed seeking treatment. But would an insurance investigator see it that way? Would they consider his delay a form of fraud? She also found letters. Dozens of them, written but never sent, addressed to her and Chukwudi and their mother. In them, Chidi poured out his fears, his regrets, his desperate love for his family. He wrote about the debt, about his decision to protect Chukwudi at any cost, about his hope that the insurance money would make everything right. I know I should have told you about the debts, he wrote in one letter dated 3 months before his death. But I couldn't bear to see disappointment in your eyes. I wanted you to remember me as strong, capable, the man who could solve any problem. Instead, I'm leaving you with problems I couldn't solve. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Chiamaka wept reading those words, alone in her father's office at 3 a.m, surrounded by the remnants of his secret struggles. She had thought she knew him completely. But people were never completely knowable. They carried hidden pains, made impossible choices, loved imperfectly but desperately. The real breakthrough came on day 9 of her investigation. She found an email exchange between her father and his oncologist, dated exactly 2 weeks before the official diagnosis. In it, Chidi described his symptoms and asked for advice. The doctor's response was clear. These symptoms could indicate many things. Come in for tests immediately. But I must warn you, even if it is cancer, early detection is our best weapon. Do not delay. Chidi had responded, I'll come in next month. Work is too busy right now. That was it. The evidence that he had delayed seeking treatment, knowing something was wrong. The insurance investigator would call it fraud by omission. Concealment of pre-existing symptoms. Chiamaka sat back, staring at the screen, feeling defeat wash over her. She couldn't hide this email. It was in the official medical records. The investigators would find it eventually. Unless a dangerous thought formed in her mind. She could delete the email. Alter the records. Create a narrative that protected her father's reputation and secured the insurance payout. It would be simple. A few clicks, a bit of careful editing. No one would ever know. Her hand hovered over the delete button. 1 click. That's all it would take. But then she heard her father's voice in her head, as clearly as if he were sitting beside her. Chiamaka, integrity isn't about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing the right thing when it costs you everything. She withdrew her hand, closed the laptop, sat in the darkness of her father's office, surrounded by his books and dreams and failures, and made a decision. She would tell the truth. All of it. To the investigators, to the insurance company, to her mother. She would lay out every mistake her father had made, every secret he had kept, and she would accept the consequences. Because that's what integrity demanded. Even if it meant losing everything. The next morning, she called a family meeting. Ngozi, looking stronger now but still fragile around the edges. Chukwudi, who had arrived from Johannesburg the night before, jet-lagged and confused. Amara, who had become more family than friend. And Barrister Oakley, who attended via video call, his face grave. Chiamaka told them everything. About the debts. About Chikwudi's accident and their father's sacrifice. About the cancer, the delays, the insurance investigation, the looming asset seizure. She watched her mother's face crumble, watched her brother's guilt and horror, watched Amara reach for Ngozi's hand in silent support. "So Papa died trying to protect us," Chikwudi said finally, his voice thick with unshed tears. "And now we're losing everything because he loved us too much." "No," Chiamaka said firmly. "We're losing everything because life is complicated and people make impossible choices and sometimes love isn't enough to fix everything. But we're not going to compound Papa's mistakes by lying or hiding or pretending. We're going to face this honestly. Together." "How?" Ngozi asked, her voice small. "How do we face losing our home? Our memories? Everything Chidi built." "We fight," Amara said suddenly, leaning forward. "Not with lies or tricks. But with truth. We tell the insurance investigators everything. The full story, not just the parts that make Chidi look bad. We show them a man who loved his family so much he broke himself trying to protect them. We make them see him as human, not just a policy number." "And if they still deny the claim?" Barrister Oakley asked. "Then we appeal. We fight in court. We tell this story to a jury. And if we lose?" Chiamaka looked at her mother, at her brother, at the friend who had stood by them through scandal and chaos. "If we lose, we start over. We sell the house, pay the debts, and we build something new. Together. Because we're Okonkwo's. And we don't give up." Ngozi stood, crossing to Chiamaka and pulling her into a fierce embrace. "When did you become so wise?" she whispered. "I learned from you, Mama. And from Papa. From all his strengths and all his mistakes." They stood like that for a long moment. Mother and daughter, survivors of betrayal and loss, warriors preparing for another battle. The road ahead was uncertain. The insurance company might still deny their claim. The investors might still seize their assets. But they would face it together, with truth as their weapon and love as their armor. And sometimes that was enough. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves stories about family and resilience. Comment your thoughts on her father's choices below. The insurance hearing took place 3 weeks later in a sterile conference room in Lagos Island. Chiamaka sat between her mother and her brother, facing a panel of 3 investigators who held their family's future in their hands. Barrister Oakley sat to her left, his files organized with military precision. Across the table, the insurance company's lawyers looked bored, confident of victory. They had reason to be confident. The evidence was damning. Emails proving Chidi had delayed treatment. Medical records showing he'd experienced symptoms for months. Testimony from colleagues who remembered him coughing, losing weight, declining to see doctors despite their urgings. But Chiamaka had prepared. Not with lies or manipulation, but with context. With humanity. With the full complicated truth. "May I speak?" she asked when the lead investigator finished summarizing the case against her father. He nodded, clearly expecting a futile emotional plea. Instead, Chiamaka stood and opened her laptop, projecting documents onto the screen behind her. "This is my brother's medical file from a hospital in Johannesburg, dated 4 years ago. These are the bills from his accident. Over 3 million rand in medical expenses. This is a settlement agreement preventing criminal charges. And this," she pulled up a bank statement, "is the evidence of where my father's money went. Every naira. Every cent. Not to vacations or luxuries. To saving his son's life and future." She clicked to the next slide. Photos of Chikwudi's medical school graduation, diploma, proud smile. "My brother is now a doctor. He serves communities in underserved areas. He's already saved lives. That's what my father's sacrifice created. Not fraud. Not deception. Purpose." The investigators shifted, uncomfortable but listening. "My father delayed seeking treatment because he was terrified," Chiamaka continued, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "Not of death. But of what his death would mean. He had borrowed heavily to save his son. He knew his family was vulnerable. He knew that without insurance, we would be destroyed. So yes, he ignored symptoms. He delayed doctor visits. He hoped, desperately irrationally hoped,
That he was wrong, that it was nothing, that he could push through just a little longer to secure our future. She pulled up the unsent letters, her father's handwriting stark on the screen. These are his words. His fears. His love. He wasn't a criminal trying to defraud an insurance company. He was a father, terrified of failing his family, making impossible choices in impossible circumstances. Ngozi was crying silently now. Chikwudi had his head in his hands. Even Barrister Oakley looked moved. I'm not asking you to ignore the facts, Chiamaka said, addressing the lead investigator directly. I'm asking you to consider the full picture. My father worked for 35 years. He paid his premiums faithfully. He built a company that employed hundreds of people. He was a pillar of his community, his church, his family. And when his son needed him, he chose love over caution. Can you honestly say, any of you, that you wouldn't have done the same? The room fell silent. The insurance lawyers were conferring in whispers. The investigators were reviewing documents, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the lead investigator spoke. Miss Okonkwo, your presentation is compelling. But our job isn't to judge your father's character. It's to determine whether he violated the terms of his policy. And according to the evidence, he knowingly concealed symptoms of a serious illness. That's fraud, regardless of his motivations. Chiamaka felt her heart sink. She had failed. They were going to lose everything. But then Chikwudi stood, his voice shaking but determined. I'd like to speak. The investigators nodded, surprised. Everything my sister said is true. My father saved me. He sacrificed everything for me. And for 4 years, I've lived with crushing guilt, knowing what he did, knowing the debt he incurred. Chikwudi pulled out his own laptop, opening a document. So I've spent the last 3 weeks creating this, a full repayment plan. I've mortgaged my future earnings as a doctor. I've secured loans against my salary for the next 20 years. I've found investors willing to take equity in my future medical practice. And I've calculated that I can repay every naira my father borrowed. Every single one. He showed them the spreadsheets, the loan agreements, the commitment letters. It was all there, a son's attempt to repay an unpayable debt. If you deny this claim, my mother loses her home, Chikwudi continued. But the investors will still get their money. I'll personally insure it. It will take me 2 decades. I'll live in a small flat, drive a used car, forgo vacations and luxuries. But I'll pay it back. Because that's what my father taught me. You honor your debts. You take responsibility. You protect the people you love. Ngozi was openly sobbing now. Chiamaka felt her own tears falling, hot and unchecked. Her brother, who had been so careless, so young and foolish 4 years ago, had become a man willing to sacrifice his entire future to make things right. The lead investigator leaned back in his chair, studying Chikwudi with something like respect. You're serious about this repayment plan? I've already signed the loan documents. Whether you approve the insurance claim or not, I'm committed. But I'm asking you, begging you, to see my family's humanity. To see that my father wasn't a criminal. He was just a man who loved too deeply and feared too much. The panel conferred for several minutes that felt like hours. Finally, the lead investigator turned back to the family. We need time to review everything you've presented. We'll have a decision in 3 days. But I want to say. He paused, clearly struggling with professional distance versus human sympathy. Your father was lucky to have children like you. I hope you know that. They left the conference room in a daze, exhausted and emotionally raw. Outside, Lagos continued its indifferent rhythm. Traffic, commerce, millions of individual dramas playing out simultaneously. They stood on the sidewalk, not sure what to say, not sure what to feel. You didn't have to do that, Chiamaka told her brother quietly. Mortgage your whole future. Yes, I did, Chikwudi replied. Papa gave me a future. The least I can do is honor it by taking responsibility for the cost. Ngozi pulled both her children into an embrace, the 3 of them standing together in the chaos of Lagos, a small island of family in the storm. 3 days felt like 3 years. They waited at home, trying to maintain normal routines while anxiety gnawed at them constantly. Chiamaka went through the motions at her architecture firm, but her mind was elsewhere. Ngozi cleaned the house obsessively, polishing memories she might soon lose.
Chikwudi studied medical journals, preparing for the life of debt he had committed to. On the third day, Barrister Oakley called. "They've made a decision. You need to come to the office. All of you." His tone was neutral, impossible to read. Chiamaka's hands shook as she drove her family across Lagos, through traffic that felt deliberately oppressive, toward a future that could go either way. In Barrister Oakley's office, the atmosphere was tense. He had documents spread across his desk, his expression carefully controlled. "The insurance company has reviewed everything," he began. "The evidence, the testimony, the repayment plans. And they've made their determination." Chiamaka held her mother's hand, felt her brother's presence beside her, and braced for devastation. "They're approving the claim," Barrister Oakley said, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. "Full payout. They've determined that while your father did delay treatment, his actions don't constitute fraud under the policy terms. The delay was measured in weeks, not months or years. And his documented financial stress, combined with his exemplary history, convinced them he deserves the benefit of the doubt." The room erupted. Ngozi collapsed into her chair, hands over her face, shoulders shaking with relief. Chikwudi let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Chiamaka felt the weight of weeks of stress lift from her shoulders, replaced by a lightness that made her dizzy. "What about the investors?" she managed to ask. "The insurance payout covers the debts with enough left over for your mother's security. The house is safe. The company can be reorganized under new management. I'm recommending you take over, Miss Okonkwo, given your business acumen and architectural background. And your brother." He looked at Chikwudi. "You can keep your future earnings. The debt is resolved." They left the office in a state of shock, emerging into Lagos sunshine that felt warmer, brighter, more hopeful than it had in weeks. People rushed past them on the sidewalk, unaware that miracles still happened in this chaotic city. "We did it, Mama," Chiamaka said, squeezing her mother's hand. "We saved Papa's legacy." "No," Ngozi replied, her voice thick with emotion but strong. "You did it. You and your brother. You saved your father's legacy by becoming everything he hoped you'd be. Honest, strong, willing to fight for what matters." They were heading to the car when Chiamaka's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, tired of unknown numbers bringing crisis and chaos. But something made her pick up. "Miss Okonkwo?" A woman's voice, professional but excited. "This is Amina Okafor from the Lagos Chronicle. I've been following your family's story, the wedding scandal, the insurance case, everything. I'd like to do a feature on resilience in African families. On women who fight impossible odds and win. Would you be willing to share your story?" Chiamaka's first instinct was to refuse. Their family had endured enough public scrutiny. But then she thought of Adana and the other women who had stood with them against Emeka. She thought of all the families struggling with debt, grief, and impossible choices. She thought of the power of truth, honestly told. "Yes," she said. "I'll tell our story. All of it. But on one condition, we tell the truth. Not a sanitized version. Not a fairy tale. The real messy, complicated truth about love and loss and the choices families make." "That's exactly what I want to hear," Amina replied. "When can we meet?" As Chiamaka scheduled the interview, she looked at her mother and brother, at the family they had fought to preserve. They had been tested by betrayal, by hidden pasts, by impossible debts and crushing judgments. But they had survived. Not unscathed, but stronger. More honest. More resilient. And their story was just beginning. The Lagos Chronicle article went viral within hours of publication. The Okonkwo family, a story of betrayal, debt, and redemption, appeared online first, then in print, then was picked up by national newspapers, blogs, radio programs, and television shows. Within a week, Chiamaka, Ngozi, and Chikwudi had become unlikely celebrities, symbols of resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. But fame brought complications. The first came in the form of Emeka's lawyer, who filed a defamation lawsuit claiming the article had portrayed his client unfairly. Never mind that Emeka was sitting in prison awaiting trial on fraud charges in multiple states. Never mind that everything in the article was documented fact. The lawsuit was clearly a harassment tactic, designed to drain the family's resources and energy. "He's doing this from prison?" Ngozi asked incredulously, reading the legal documents in their living room. The man who stole from me, who humiliated me, who held me hostage on a fire escape, he's suing us? It's a common tactic for con artists, Barrister Oakley explained via video call. They use the legal system as a weapon. File frivolous lawsuits, tie up victims in court, make them too exhausted to fight. But we can handle this. The article is factual. We have documentation for every claim. He has no case. Still, the lawsuit felt like a dark cloud over their newfound peace. Just when they thought they could breathe, just when they thought the worst was over, here was another battle. But then something unexpected happened. Women started reaching out. Dozens of them, then hundreds, sharing their own stories of being scammed, manipulated, abandoned by men who preyed on their vulnerability. Some had lost money. Others had lost dignity. All had lost trust. But Chiamaka's story, her family's willingness to speak truth publicly, gave them courage to speak their own truths. A support group formed organically, meeting at Grace Lighthouse Church where Ngozi had once been a member. Reverend Adeyemi, who had been so quick to judge during the wedding scandal, offered the church's facilities free of charge, a quiet act of penance for his earlier harshness. Chiamaka attended the first meeting, expecting maybe a dozen women. Instead, over 100 showed up, filling the church hall with stories of survival, rage, grief, and ultimately, solidarity. Adana Nwosu stood at the front, her presence commanding. "We've all been where Ngozi was," she began, her voice steady. Vulnerable. Desperate to feel wanted. Willing to overlook red flags because loneliness is terrifying. But we're not alone anymore. We're a community. And together, we're going to make sure what happened to us doesn't happen to others. The group organized quickly, creating resources, a database of known scammers, legal advice for victims, financial planning assistance, even self-defense classes. They called themselves the Phoenix Circle. Women rising from the ashes of betrayal, stronger and fiercer than before. Ngozi became one of the circle's leaders, using her experience to counsel other women. Chiamaka watched her mother transform week by week, the shame and humiliation replaced by purpose and power. The woman who had once been too desperate for love to see danger was now the woman teaching others to trust their instincts, to demand respect, to never compromise their dignity for companionship. "I spent a year drowning in grief," Ngozi told one meeting, her voice strong. "And when Emeka appeared, I grabbed onto him like a life raft, not realizing he was pulling me deeper underwater. But my daughter, my stubborn brilliant daughter, refused to let me drown. She fought for me even when I pushed her away. That's what we do for each other now. We fight. We protect. We refuse to let each other sink." The applause was thunderous. Meanwhile, Chukwudi had returned to Johannesburg to complete his medical residency, but he came back to Lagos every few months, volunteering at community clinics, working with Phoenix Circle to provide health screenings and medical advice to women in need. The guilt he had carried for years had transformed into purposeful action. "I can't change the past," he told Chiamaka during one visit. "Can't undo the accident or Papa's sacrifice. But I can honor it by being the doctor he hoped I'd be. By serving people who need help the most." He had also started a scholarship fund in their father's name, supporting students from low-income families pursuing medical careers. The first recipient was a young woman whose mother had been scammed out of her savings. A member of Phoenix Circle who had almost given up on her daughter's education dreams until the scholarship materialized. Chiamaka watched her brother hand over the scholarship check at a small ceremony, saw the mother's tears of gratitude, saw Chukwidi's quiet pride, and felt her heart swell with love for the man he had become. The defamation lawsuit was dismissed within 2 months, the judge calling it a transparent attempt to silence victims of fraud. Emeka's trial proceeded, with Chiamaka and Ngozi both testifying about his schemes. When the verdict came back, guilty on 17 counts of fraud, theft, and identity theft, the courtroom erupted in applause. But the sentencing hearing brought a surprise. Emeka's mother appeared, an elderly woman in traditional dress, her face carved with sorrow. "My son is a criminal," she said, her voice quavering. "I cannot defend what he has done. But he was not always this way. He was once a good boy, who helped his sisters, who worked hard. Then he made one bad choice, then another, and each time it became easier to justify, to rationalize, to believe his own lies. I do not ask for mercy for him. I ask for mercy for the man he once was, before he lost himself in greed and cruelty." The judge sentenced Emeka to 15 years in prison. As he was led away, he looked at Ngozi one final time. No apology. No remorse. Just the empty gaze of a man who had traded his humanity for temporary gains and discovered too late the cost of his choices. Ngozi didn't flinch under his stare. She had already moved past him, already rebuilt herself into something stronger than his manipulation could ever break. 6 months after the trial, Chiamaka stood in the lobby of her architecture firm, reviewing designs for a new project. Affordable housing for single mothers and widows, funded by a combination of government grants and private donations, including a substantial contribution from Phoenix Circle. The building would include not just apartments, but community spaces, childcare facilities, job training centers. It would be called Chidi Okonkwo House, a monument to her father's complicated legacy. His love, his sacrifices, his mistakes, and ultimately, the family he had fought to protect. He would have loved this, Ngozi said, appearing beside her daughter to study the architectural renderings. All his life, he built structures. But you're building something better. Community. Safety. Second chances. We're building it together, Mama. You, me, Chikwudi, Adana, all the Phoenix women. Papa gave us the foundation. We're just building on it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching through the window as Lagos pulsed with its relentless energy. The city that had witnessed their disgrace now witnessed their resurrection. The community that had judged them now celebrated their resilience. Chiamaka's phone buzzed. A message from Amara. Turn on the news. Now. She pulled up the live broadcast on her laptop. A local television station was announcing their Woman of the Year award. And there on the screen was a photo of Chiamaka standing with her mother and the Phoenix Circle, strong and united. For her courage in exposing fraud, her dedication to protecting vulnerable women, and her commitment to building community in the face of betrayal, we honor Chiamaka Okonkwo, the announcer said. She represents the best of what Lagos, what Nigeria, can be. Resilient. Honest. Unbreakable. Ngozi pulled her daughter into an embrace, both women laughing and crying simultaneously. Look at you, she whispered. My warrior. My hero. No. Mama. I'm just your daughter. Doing what you taught me. Fighting for family, telling the truth, never giving up. That evening, they gathered at the house in Ikoyi, the house they had almost lost, now secured forever. Chikwudi had flown in for the award ceremony. Amara arrived with food enough for an army. Members of Phoenix Circle stopped by to celebrate, the house filling with laughter, stories, and the kind of joy that only comes after surviving darkness. Reverend Adeyemi appeared at the door, looking uncharacteristically humble. May I come in? Ngozi studied him for a moment, remembering his judgment, his quick condemnation during her lowest moment. Then she stepped aside, gesturing him in. Everyone deserves a second chance, Reverend. Even those who forget to give them to others. He nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. I came to apologize. For my harshness. For judging when I should have helped. The church. We failed you. I failed you. Yes, Ngozi agreed simply. You did. But you're here now. You've given Phoenix Circle a home. Actions matter more than apologies. They shook hands, a small act of forgiveness that felt monumental in its implications. The community that had been so quick to judge was slowly learning to embrace complexity, to offer grace, to understand that everyone carried hidden struggles. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Chiamaka found herself alone on the balcony, looking out over Lagos's glittering nightscape. She thought of everything that had happened, the wedding scandal, the insurance battle, the lawsuit, the trial. The shame and the judgment and the resilience that had carried them through. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. I saw your story. Thank you for giving me courage to leave my abusive marriage. Thank you for showing me I can survive. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. You saved my life. Chiamaka read the message 3 times, feeling the weight of responsibility and privilege settle over her shoulders. Their story, their pain, their struggle, their triumph, had become a beacon for others navigating their own darkness. She looked back through the window at her mother, laughing with Chikwudi and Amara, her face radiant with a happiness that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. She thought of her father, flawed and loving, whose mistakes had nearly destroyed them but whose love had ultimately saved them. And she made a promise, to him, to herself, To all the women out there fighting their own battles, she would keep telling the truth. Keep fighting for justice. Keep building communities where vulnerable people could find safety and strength. Because that's what it meant to honor a complicated legacy. Not by pretending it was perfect, but by taking its lessons, both painful and beautiful, and using them to create something better. The city sprawled below her, full of stories like theirs. Stories of betrayal and resilience, shame and redemption, judgment and grace. Lagos, with all its chaos and corruption and beauty, was home. And she would spend her life making it a little safer, a little kinder, a little more forgiving for the next woman who needed a second chance. Behind her, through the open door, she heard her mother's laughter, her brother's voice, her friend's joy. The sound of family, not perfect, not unmarred by struggle, but present. Fighting. Surviving. Thriving. And in that moment that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The end. Thank you for watching this journey of resilience and redemption. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. What's the most important lesson you learned from the Okonkwo family's story? And remember, no matter what betrayal or judgment you faced, you have the strength to rise again. You are enough. You are worthy. You are unbreakable. From all of us at Kaysmart's Mythic Tales, thank you for letting us share this story with you. Until next time, keep fighting. Keep believing. Keep being the hero of your own story.